Let's read the introduction. The positions and possibilities of the Masonic Order. The papers here collected are written solely for the members of the Masonic Order constituted under the United Grand Lodge of England. To all such they are offered in the best spirit of fraternity and goodwill, with the wish to render to the order some small return for the profit the offer has received from his association with it, extending over 32 years. They have been written with a view to promote the deeper understanding of the meaning of Masonry, to provide the explanation of it that one constantly hears called for, and that becomes all the more necessary in view of the unprecedented increase of interest in and membership of the order at the present day. The meaning of Masonry, however, is a subject usually left entirely unexpounded, and that accordingly remains largely unrealized by its members, save such few as make it their private study. The authorities of what in all other aspects is an elaborately organized and admirably controlled community have hitherto made no provision for explaining the teaching in the noble science which Masonry claims itself to be, and was certainly designed to impart. It seems taken for granted that reception into the order will automatically be accompanied into the ability to appreciate the forthwith in its full value all that one there finds. The contrary is the case, for Masonry is a veiled, cryptic expression of the difficult science of spiritual life, and the understanding of it calls for special, informed guidance on one hand, and on the other a genuine and earnest desire for knowledge, and no small capacity for spiritual perception on the part of those seeking to be instructed. And not infrequently one finds brethren discontinuing their interest in their membership because they find out that Masonry means nothing to them, and that no explanation or guidance is vouchsafed them. Where such instruction provided, assimilated, and responded to, the life of the order would be enormously quick and deepened in its efficiency as a means of initiation intensified, whilst incidentally the fact would prove an added safeguard against the admission into the order of unsuitable members, by which it is merely persons who fail to satisfy conventional qualifications, but also those who, whilst fitted in those respects, are as yet either so intellectually or spiritually unprogressed as to be incapable of benefiting from the initiation in its true sense, although passing formally through initiation rites. Spiritual quality rather than numbers, ability to understand the Masonic system and reduce its implications into personal experience rather than the pre-functionary conferment of its rights, are the desires of the craft today. As a contribution to the repairing the absence of explanation referring to these papers have been compiled. The first two of them have been read as lectures at lodge meetings. Many requests that they should be printed and made more widely available led to my expanding their subject matter into greater detail than could be used for occasional lectures. And accordingly they are here amplified by a paper containing fuller notes upon craft symbolism. To complete the consideration of the craft system, it is necessary also to add a chapter upon that which forms the crown of accumulation of the craft degrees, and without which would they be imperfect, the order of the Royal Arch. Lastly, a chapter has been added upon the important subject which forms the background of the rest, the relationship of modern Masonry to the ancient mysteries, from which it is the direct, though greatly attenuated, spiritual descendant. Thus, in 5 papers, I have sought to provide a survey of the whole Masonic subject as expressed by the craft and arch degrees, which it is hoped may provide illuminating to increasing number of brethren who feel that Freemasonry enshrines something deeper and greater than in the absence of guidance that they have been able to realize. It does not profess to be more than elementary, and far from exhaustive survey, the subject might be treated much more fully in more technical terminology and with abundant references to authorities. Were one compiling a mere ambitious and scholarly treatise, but to the average Mason such a treatise would have proved less serviceable than a summary expressed in as simple and untechnical terms as may be, and unburdened by numerous literary references. Some repetition due to the papers have been written at different times may be found in later chapters of points already dealt with in previous ones, though the restiment may be advantageous in emphasizing those points and maintaining continuity in the exposition, for reasons explained in the chapter itself. That on the Holy Royal Arch will probably prove difficult of comprehension by those unversed in the literature and psychology of religious mysticism. Religious mysticism. Let me say it again. Religious mysticism. If so, the reading of it may be deferred or neglected, but since a survey of the Masonic system would, like the system itself, be incomplete without reference to the supreme degree, and since that degree deals with the matters of advanced psychological and spiritual experience, about which explanation must always be difficult, the subject has been treated here with as much simplicity of statement as is possible, and rather with a view to indicate to what great heights of spiritual attainment the craft degrees point as achievable, than with the expectation that they will be readily comprehended by readers without some measure of mystical experience, and perhaps unfamiliar with the testimony of the mystics thereto. Purposely these papers avoid dealing with matters of craft history, of mere antiquarian, of archaeological interest, dates peculiars of Masonic constitution, historical changes and developments in the external aspects of the craft, references to old lodges and names of outstanding people connected therewith. These and such like matters can be read about elsewhere. They are all subordinate to what alone is the vital movement, and what so many brethren are hungering for, knowledge of the spiritual purpose and the lineage of the order, and the present-day value of rites and initiation. In giving these pages to publication, care has been taken to observe due retenance in respect for the essential matters. The grand nature of the Masonic system is, however, nowadays widely known to outsiders and is easily discernible from many printed sources, whilst the large interest in and output of literature upon mystical religion and the science of the inward life during the last few years has familiarized many with the subject of which, as shown in these papers, Masonry is but a specialized form. To explain Masonry in general outline, there is therefore not to divulge a subject which is entirely exclusive to its members, but merely to show that Masonry stands in line with other doctrinal systems in calculating the same principles, and to which no secrecy attaches, and that it is a specialized and highly effective method in calculating those principles. Truth, whether expressed in Masonry or otherwise, is at all times an open secret, but is as a pillar of light to those able to receive and profit by it, and all others but one of darkness and unintelligibility. An elementary and formal secrecy is requisite as a practical precaution against the intrusion of an improper persons and the preventing of profanation. In other respects, the vital secrets of life and of any system expounding life protect themselves, even though shouted from the housetops, because they mean nothing to those yet unqualified for the knowledge and unready to identify themselves with it by incorporating it into their habitual thought and conduct. In the view of the great spread and popularity of Masonry today, when there are some 3,000 lodges in Great Britain alone, it is well to consider its present bearings and tendencies, and to give a thought to future possibilities. And the order is a semi-secret, semi-public institution, secret in respect of its activities, intra-mensina, I guess, but otherwise a full public notoriety, with its doors open to any public applicant for admission is of ordinary good character and repute. Those who enter it, as the majority do, entirely ignorant of what they will find there, usually because they have friends there, or know Masonry to be an institution devoted to high ideals and benevolence, and with which it may be socially desirable to be connected, may or may not be attracted and profit by what is disclosed to them, and may or may not see anything beyond the bare form of the symbol, or hear anything beyond the mere letter of the word. Their admission is quite a lottery. Their initiation too often remains but a formality, not an actual awakening into an order and quality of life previously unexperienced. Their membership, unless such an awakening eventually ensues from the careful study and faithful practice of the order's teaching, and has little, if any, greater influence upon them than would ensue from their joining a purely social club. For initiation, for which there are so many candidates, little conscience of what is implied and what for which they ask, what does it really mean and intend? It means a new beginning, a break away from the old method and order of life, and an entrance upon a new one of larger self-knowledge, depending and understanding and intensified virtue. It means a transition from the merely natural state and stands of life towards a regenerate and supernatural state and standard. It means a turning away from the old pursuit of the popular ideas of the outer world and the conviction that those ideals are but shadows, images, and temporal substitutions for the eternal reality that underlies them, to the keen and undivertible quest that reality itself, and recovery of those genuine secrets of our being which lie buried and hidden, the center or innermost part of our souls. It means the awakening of those hitherto dormant higher facilities of the soul which endure their possessor with the lot, in the form a new enhanced consciousness and enlarged perceptive faculty. And lastly, in words with which every Mason is familiar, it means that the postulant will henceforth dedicate and devote his life to the divine rather than to his own or any other service, so that by the principles of the order he may be better enabled to display that beauty of godliness which previously perhaps has not manifested through him. To comply with this definition of initiation, which it might be useful to apply as a test not only to those who seek for admission into the order, but to ourselves who are already within it, it's obvious that the special qualifications of mind and intention are essential in a candidate of the type likely to be benefited by the order in the way that its doctrine contemplates, and that it is not necessarily the ordinary man of the world, personal friend and good fellow though he may be according to the usual social standards, who is either properly prepared for or likely to benefit in any vital sense by reception into. The true candidate must indeed needs be, as the word candidates implies, a white man. White within, as symbolically he is white vestured without, so that no inward stain or soilure may obstruct the the dawn within his soul of the light which he professes to be the predominant wishes of his heart on asking for admission, whilst, if really desirous of learning the secrets and mysteries of his own being, he must be prepared to divest himself of all past preconceptions and thought habits, and with the childlike meekness and docility surrender his mind to the reception of some perhaps novel and unexpected truths which initiation promises to impart, and which will more and more unfold and justify themselves within those, and those only, who are and continue to keep themselves properly prepared for them. Know thyself. was the injunction inscribed over the portals of ancient temples of initiation, for with that knowledge was promised the knowledge of all secrets and all mysteries, and Masonry was designed to teach self-knowledge, but self-knowledge involves a knowledge much deeper, vaster, and more difficult than it's popularly conceived. It is not acquired by the formal passage through 3 or 4 degrees in as many months. It is a knowledge impossible of full achievement until knowledge of every other kind has been laid aside, and a difficult path of life long and strenuously pursued that alone fits and leads its followers to an attainment. The wisest and most advanced of us is perhaps still but an entered apprentice at this knowledge, however high his title or rank. Here and there may be one worthy of being hailed as a fellow craft in the true sense. The full master mason, the just man made perfect, who has actually and not merely ceremonially travailed the entire path, endured its tasks and ordeals, and become raised into conscious union with the author and giver of life, and able to meditate and impart that life to others. It is at all times hard to find. So high, so ideal an attainment, it may be urged, is beyond our reach. We are but ordinary men of the world, sufficiently occupied already with our primary civic, social, and family obligations, and the following the obvious, normal path of natural life granted. Nevertheless, to point to that attainment as possible to us and our destiny, to indicate that the path of self-perfecting to those who care and dare to follow it, modern speculative masonry was instituted, and to emphasizing the facts these papers are devoted. For masonry means this, or it means nothing. Worth the serious pursuit of thoughtful men, nothing that cannot be pursued as well as outside the craft as within it. It proclaims the fact that there exists a higher and more secret path of life than that which we normally tread, and that when the outer world and its pursuits and rewards lose their attractiveness for us and prove insufficient to our deeper needs, as sooner or later they will, we are compelled to turn back upon ourselves to seek and knock at the door of the world within, and it's upon this inner world and path that through it masonry promises light, charts the way, and indicates the qualifications and conditions of the progress. This is the sole aim and intention of masonry, behind its more elementary and obvious symbolism, behind its counsels to virtue and conventional morality, behind the platitudes and sensuous phraseology, which nowadays might as well be subject to competent and intelligent revision, with which, after the fashion of their day, the 18th century compilers of its ceremonies clothed its teaching, there exists the framework of a scheme of initiation into that higher path of life, where alone the secrets and mysteries of our being are to be learned. A scheme, moreover, that will be later shown in these pages, reproduces for the modern world the main features of the ancient mysteries that have been well described by the learned writer on the subject as an epitome, or reflection at a far distance, the once universal science. But because for long and for many masonry has been meant less than this, for it has not yet fulfilled its original purpose of being an efficient initiative instructive it was designed to be. Its energies have been diverted from its true instructional purpose into social and philosophic channels, excellent in their way, but foreign to and assertions upon the primal main intention, indeed so little perceived or appreciated that its central intention that one frequently hears is confessed by men, eminent possession in the craft and warm devotion to it, that only their interest in its great charitable institutions keep alive their connections with the order. Relief is indeed duty incumbent upon a Mason, but Masonic interpretation is not meant to be limited to physical necessity. The spiritual as well as the financially poor and distressed are always with us, and to the former equally with the latter. Masonry was designed to minister. Theoretically, every man was upon reception into the craft acknowledges himself as within a category of the spiritually poor, and as a constant to renounce all temporal riches if happily by the sacrifice his hungry heart may be filled with those good things which money cannot purchase, but to whom the truly initiated can help him. But if Masonry has not yet fulfilled its primary purpose through engaging in admirable secondary activities as of yet initiated instructive low efficiency, it may be that with enlarged understanding of its design that efficiency may yet become considerably increased. During the last 2 centuries, the craft has been gradually developing from small and crude beginnings into its present vast and highly elaborated organization. Today, the number of lodges and membership of the craft are increasing beyond all precedent. One asks itself what this growing interest portends, and to what it will or can be made to lead. The growth synchronizes with the corresponding defection of interest in Orthodox religion and public worship. It need not now be inquired whether to what extent the simple principles of this faith and this humanitarian ideals of Masonry are with some men taking the place of theology offered in various churches. It is possible that to some extent they do so. But the fact is, with us, the ideals of the Masonic order are making a wide appeal to the best instinct of the large numbers of men, that the order has implicably become the greatest social institution in the empire. Its principles of faith and ethics are simple and virtually universal acceptance, providing means for the expression of universal fraternity under a common divine fatherhood and a common loyalty to the headship and established government of the state. It leaves room for divergence of private belief and a view upon matters upon which unity is impracticable and perhaps undesirable. It is utterly clean of politics and political intrigue, but nevertheless has unconsciously become a real, though unobstructive, asset of political value, both in stabilizing the social fabric and tending to foster international amity. The elaborateness of its organization and the care of admirable control of its affairs by its higher authorities and praiseworthy in the extreme, whilst in the conduct of its individual lodges there has been a progressive endeavor to raise the standard of ceremonial work to a far higher degree of reverence and intelligence than was perhaps possible under conditions existing not long ago. The Masonic craft has grown and ramified to dimensions undreamed by its original founders, and its present rate of increase in its potentialities and influence in the future are quite incalculable. What seems now needed to intensify the worth and usefulness of this great brotherhood is to deepen its understanding of its own system, to educate its members in the deeper meaning and true purpose of its rites and philosophy. Where this achieved, the Masonic order would become, in proportion to the achievement, a spiritual force greater than it could ever be, so long as it continues content with the formal and unintelligent perpetration of rites, and the real and sacred purpose of which remains largely unperceived, and participation in which too often means nothing more than an association with agreeable semi-religious social institution. Carried to its fullest, that achievement would involve the revival in a form adopted to modern conditions of the ancient wisdom teaching and the practice of those mysteries which become prescribed 15 centuries ago but of which modern Masonry is the direct representative descendant, as will appear later in these pages. The future development and value of the order as a moral force in society depend therefore upon the view of its members take of their system. If they do not spiritualize it, they will but increasingly materialize it. If they fail to interpret its veiled purport, to enter the understanding of its underlying philosophy, and it translates symbolism into what is signified thereby, they will be mistakenly shadowed for substance, a husk for the kennel, and specularizing what was designed as a means of spiritual instruction and grace. And grace. It is from lack of instruction rather than of desire to learn the meaning of Masonry that the craft suffers today, but as one finds everywhere, that desire exists, and so for what they may be worth, those papers are offered to the craft as contribution towards satisfying it. Let me conclude with an epilogue and an aspiration. In the Chronicles of Israel, it may be read how that after long preparatory labor, after employing the choicest material and the most skillful artificers, Solomon the king at last made an end of the building and beautifying his temple, and dedicated it to a state as perfect as human provision could make it. And how that then, but not until then, his offering was accepted, and the acceptance was signified by a divine descent upon it, so that the glory of the Lord shone through and filled the whole house. So if we have it so, may it be with the temple of the Masonic order. Since the interpretation of speculative Masonry, it has been a building and expanding now in the last 300 years, fashioned of living stones into a far-reaching organic structure, brought gradually under the good guidance of its rulers to high perfection on its temporal side in respect of its external observances, and made available for high purposes, and giving godly witness in a dark, troubled world. Upon these preliminary efforts let there now be invoked in this crowning and completion blessing, that the spirit of wisdom and understanding may descend upon the work of our hands, in the abundant measure prospecting it still further and filling and transfiguring our whole Masonic house. Not my Masonic house, I don't have one. Anyway, that concludes the introduction of this. Just check back another couple of days and I'll continue on with chapter number 1. Again, this is Patrick with MasonicDeception.com and SharingTheTruthinLove.com. And